Hi everyone. In this video, I thought I would discuss a little technique for gouache that I actually prefer over any other style that's taught or that people like to do with gouache, and that is basically using it like watercolor. So it's just exactly like what it sounds like. All the blending that I'll be doing up until I break out the white and do the highlights is going to all be with water. So generally, the consistency that people will talk about working with in gouache is the range from tea to butter. So you got tea, coffee, milk, cream, and butter. Normally, I work in the milk to cream range, and then I use butter at the end when I'm putting on my highlights with full strength white. But for this technique, you're going to basically be using tea and coffee pretty much the whole time, and then milk will kind of be your last stage. Thick milk, I guess, something between milk and cream, but that is, it's a technique that I like because it's closer to watercolor, which is my go-to preferred medium. I kind of go between gouache and watercolor as far as my favorites. And gouache can be very versatile in the way where, you can use it like watercolor, but when you try to use watercolor like gouache, you end up just having really thick watercolor that can sometimes look shiny and, just really, really heavy. And then you lose the whole reason you're using watercolor, which is the transparency. So that's why I like using this technique with gouache, because you kind of get the best of both worlds. And there's a lot less room for overworking it and making mistakes with the whole layering and patchy, removing the underlayers kind of struggles that people mostly have with gouache. So it's just a lot more of a relaxing way to use it, at least in my opinion, for, I don't know, I just like to bend the rules, I mean, I hear a lot of people say, oh, there's no rules in art, and then you come across like tons of videos where that's what they're talking about, all the rules of these different mediums. So I just thought I'd share this with you guys because a lot of people struggle with, kind of, how do I use gouache? What's the best techniques? What's the best approach? How do I get it to blend? How do I get it from reactivating and picking up the layers? All these struggles can be solved if you just pretty much use it like watercolor, and then eventually you make the choice to move into the thicker applications of it. But, this is for not only if you're just starting out using this medium and you just want to get to know it, but it's also just a lighter way, just a different way to use it. And I do have another video that I made a few months ago, which highlights this technique that I came across in another video that I mentioned in that video, about how to remove gouache as the main technique for blending and laying it down, and just, it's just another different way to use it. So for anyone who may be coming across this channel for the first time, or looking for other ways to use gouache, there's no real set way to use it, and a lot of people do teach or advise to use it in a certain way, but you can use these things however you want, whatever makes you happy, whatever produces the results you want. And the technique that I talked about in that other video is actually an old technique that old illustrators used to use back in the day, and probably still do in their professional sense. But yeah, just wanted to show you guys that there's a lot of different ways to use things. And I guess since I discovered how much I love this medium, I've really just been wanting to share that enthusiasm, I guess, because I know it took me a while to really understand how to use gouache, or more accurately, how to like it the way I wanted to use it. And I was determined, because I just really liked the look of it. And I just kept thinking I was using it wrong. And back then I had the jelly gouache, and I was never going to use that much at one time for it to, they give you a lot, and then it stays moist if you keep it in the container for at least a certain amount of time, for a good few months, I guess. But once those little rocks, they're like little bricks, once they harden, it's, you can reactivate it, but it's a process, and it's a little bit of work. If you've got some dried gouache in a palette, and you add a little bit of water, like you saw me doing here in this video, it'll quickly turn back to, like a milk consistency, or at least something much thicker than watercolor. And it dries fast, but it reactivates easily. And back then, when I had those jelly gouache cups, I was still pretty frustrated with gouache, and I didn't really know that there were other ways to use it. And so I let it sit, and I ended up having to throw it away, because I just didn't want to go through all the work of trying to reactivate those little bricks. It looked like it was in an ice cube tray too. It was like, yeah, there was like a bunch of little colored ice cubes, and it just looked like a lot of work. So I was like, no, I'm not doing this. And then it took me a good, I think, 2 years after that to decide to try to use gouache again. And then I bought it in tubes, and just put a little bit out into a palette, and used it like gouache. I mean, of course I used it like gouache. It was gouache. Used it like watercolor once I realized you could do that. And then I kind of had this epiphany where I thought, wow, you can use it like watercolor and then build it up. So see you guys in the next one. Bye.